to the cloud. All right, so we're recording. This is the Esoteric Book Club with Evelyn von Zuel and Analisa 6. And Kathleen Callahan is here. And, oh, what's your handle, Kathleen?
I'm Daughter of Wands.
Oh, yes, Daughter of Wands. I forgot it was on the tip of my tongue. Yeah. So this is, well, I don't even know what meeting number this is, but we're going over chapter 13, which is separation. And it's going to be a pretty quick meeting because it's not a very long chapter. And I think at this point, really, we're after separation, we're moving into more of a more complicated portion of the evolution of self. Because the separation is kind of the way that I'm seeing it is one of the last aspects to kind of really flushing out and releasing all of the old things that we're trying to dissolve. And it's more of it's more on the physical, emotional level, whereas the last few steps are more transcendental and have more to do with your connection to your subconscious and to your higher self, and be more aware of that connection, whereas these are very realistic physical manifestations of like anger and upset and rage and judgment and so, and like letting go and like just cry basically. And so the separation aspect is becoming more mindful of the last two steps that we had taken. Mindful, it's an air aspect, separation, which we will get into. But before we do get into all of that, we'll start off with the astrological aspects that are going on in life right now. Sky now. There we go. So we're in Cancer season, and the eclipse is coming up on July 2nd, and that has been, the themes have already been popping up for a lot of people in terms of the eclipse coming up. It's a really big eclipse for the United States chart, which will in turn affect, of course, the citizens of the United States heavily. A lot of themes that have been surfacing, and not to mention now that Taurus, the moon is in Taurus at the moment, just hitting Uranus in Taurus, but a lot of themes are regarding the environment, environmentalism, our waste, transport of waste, how our waste is being recycled, how it's actually hasn't been recycled for this past entire year. The country's sanctions that Trump has imposed on other countries now, we're starting to see the backlash of that, which is recycling plastic has become one of the biggest problems from the sanctions that are popping up. And that's very clear connection to Uranus in Taurus and making a difficult aspect to Mercury, which is transportation of goods and things and services. Let's see, Venus is also in Gemini, so that's another indication of, you know, how are our goods, how are the things that we are making and creating as a culture and society being received, how are they being moved back and forth, are they using materials, wasting materials along the way? Single-use plastics is a big concern now. Also, we just had the Democratic debates, and one of the big hot topics was the environment, and how candidates are seeing environmentalism as the biggest problem that we are facing currently as a society and a country. And that, of course, would all kind of get wrapped up with this Pluto and Capricorn and Saturn and Capricorn, like we pretty much say every time we meet. But again, we're just seeing the evolution of these transits every time we meet. It's like, oh, that also pertains to Pluto and Capricorn. Oh, that also pertains to Saturn and Capricorn. We're just seeing how it's cycling through culture and our livelihood. Let's see. For some reason, I forgot that Chiron was in Aries for a long time. And when I finally remembered that Chiron was in Aries, it made me remember how much of this this weird thing that's going on with culture right now, which is like everyone's individuality is on display in some way, shape, or form in the digital realm. And it's either for the better or for the worst for people. And this strange relationship to human connection via internet and technology, which would also be Uranus and Taurus, has come up too. Like, is it a true connection? Is it a false connection? People are still heavily depressed. Americans are far more depressed than they've ever been, although we're so much more connected to each other than we've ever been. So how could that be? So the Chiron in Aries being this pain of being an individual, the pain of being separate from other people, the pain of having to feel alone or go at it alone, even though we seemingly have so much more friends and social life and connectivity together. So we're kind of just learning how to navigate our own personal loneliness in a world where we're even more so, like, it's seemingly not alone. It's a strange dichotomy that this Chiron in Aries brings up. Mercury will be going retrograde soon. Let's see. So on the 8th of July, it'll hit retrograde at 4 degrees in Leo and then go back into Cancer again. So whatever upsets and things that you had to communicate with your family about is going to come back again, and you'll have to talk about it again. And then that will probably hit that eclipse point in, sorry, I'm having a little bit of a hard time fully gauging this. Oh, so it'll hit the eclipse point where in August. So in August, that Cancer, the Mercury will be hitting that Cancer. Oh no, it'll go all the way. It'll hit pretty close, and then go forward motion again. Let's see. So we already hit the solstice point, the longest day of the year. So now the sun will be slowly descending back from now until fall into its lowered position. Currently, Jupiter is really bright in the sky. It's right here on the horizon line, so you can see it on the eastern horizon. If you go outside and take a look, it's super bright. Last night was one of the best nights that you could have seen it because the sun is totally opposite it. So at night, Jupiter would be, so you can even see when Jupiter hits probably around 11 o'clock at night, it'll be at the highest point, at the zenith, and super bright, super glorious, and all of its fire blazing pride in the high night sky. I highly recommend going out and taking a look if you haven't yet. It's beautiful. And then Venus is moving into her morning star phase, or she is in her morning star phase. So what that means is that Venus is rising before the sun, right above the horizon in the morning. which turns her into the light bearer as we know it, the one who is transcending or going beyond the will of the sun. And this is a phase where we would call her, I call her, what is her name during this phase? The morning star. I mean, she has many names. The Maya had a name for her position in this, which was it Quetzalcoatl? It was Quetzalcoatl and Xochitl were the two Venus aspects before.
I thought Quetzalcoatl was the evening star one.
I think you're right. Xochitl is the brother. Yeah. Xochitl is the morning star Venus, and then Quetzalcoatl is the evening star Venus. So we're in the Xochitl phase with Venus currently, which kind of gives rise to the feminine. Of course, the feminine is going its own will. It's going its own way. It's going beyond the boundary of the sun. So that's why it's not, well, in the patriarchal world, it's seen as kind of an evil Venus or a Luciferian expression of Venus, because intelligence is weighed more over the, I guess, being connected to the earth. There's a heightened sense of of intelligence and education and knowledge and higher knowing about self and the deeper knowing of self. It's in Gemini too, so kind of emphasizing learning about this aspect of Venus. We're just kind of getting to know her in this aspect. If you want to know more about this Venus scenario and what it means, there's this really great book called Venus Star Rising, and it's all about the Venus cycles. And this is, of course, the 5-pointed star that she makes around the sun and the earth together. So, and that is a really great book. Okay. Does anyone want to add anything? Analisa, Kathleen? No? Okay.
Chiron Sun Square today, but that's it.
Chiron Sun Square and Cardinal. It's a Cardinal Square too. So I don't know about you, but that whole identity within the family theme is coming up heavy for me and the clients that I'm seeing. But yeah, so moving on to the Emerald Tablet. Analisa, you had a lot going on in terms of the separation chapter, but I guess we should just get into what chapter 13 was about, discuss a little bit what separation even is, its connections to the occult and esoteric symbols. And so, like I mentioned earlier, separation is a connection to air. It has that air quality to it, even though it is likened to Scorpio, as Dennis William Hauck mentions at the end of the chapter, due to the depth of one needing to let go of old parts of the self that were wounded. So separation, from my understanding so far, is the point where we have merged our ashes of the self with the water, purifying waters of the true soul. And in separation, we now filter out with whatever means necessary the ash from the water. And we have, as you can see, a murky jar of water. It's not clear yet. It's still a little tainted. It reminds me of in high school when they try to do that STD example of filter out the water after it's been mixed with Doritos. You can't, see, it's impossible, so don't have sex. So I was like, it reminds me of that. But so the water is still cloudy, it's still foggy. And so this is still how it happened, how it is. This is you after separation. But at this point during the separation process, you could go through an actual separation from your friends, from your family, from the people that you love, from things that you know to had been true for you. You could separate yourself from the world. That's a physical aspect of separation, and it can be willingly or forced onto you. During separation, you can become aggressive and easily tempered. You can feel very like it's a defensive period when you're separated from all the things that you were comforted by. You feel vulnerable. You feel like kind of like you're starting over again. And you really are. You're starting over again with this cloudy water. Now you're saying to yourself, now what do I do now? I'm here. I don't really know what direction to go. I've let go of everything that I know to be true. My ego has suffered a large burn. My ego, where'd it go? I need to create something of some sort of identity now. And this period of separation is often associated with knives, sharp objects. So in occult symbolism, anything that has those things like sharp objects, anything that would help filter is a sign of separation. So there's an illustration in the Emerald Tablet that Dennis William Hauck uses to show an alchemist separating himself with a sword. The Orphic egg is that creation, and he's about to cut it in half with the sword of separation. And so I think that, have you guys done cord cutting rituals before? Yeah, this is definitely a cord cutting meditation experience where you go into your higher realms, into your meditative state, and then you separate the etheric cords that connect you still, because even though you've physically separated yourself from someone, something, or someplace, you can still have that spiritual and etheric connection to them, thus creating that karma where it pulls you back and you keep going back and doing the old bad habits or patterns again. So doing the spiritual cord cutting is important along with the physical separation process, the mind, body, spirit, getting all those three in line. So another form that Dennis William Hauck says that really helps to move separation throughout all parts of you is doing prana breath work. Or chi breath work, where you're moving the prana through your entire body and you're making a conscious connection between the mind, body, and spirit. Separation, let's see, oh yeah, the wind carries it in its belly. That's the asterisk for this process. Let's see. So some things that if you notice happening to yourself psychologically throughout the process is the development of self-deprecating thoughts and a certain level of separation from the thing. So self-deprecating thoughts or attitude in the personality. I'm sure we've all seen it and people do that. I'm sure we've all done it. It's like a defense mechanism where you say things about yourself in a lowered manner. But that's a process of seeing yourself separate from self. So you're saying, you're subconsciously making a comment about a lower aspect to your being that you may not be conscious of. Most of the time people aren't conscious of these comments that they're making, which is why it comes out as self-deprecating. Of course, a conscious person would understand, oh, I'm going through a shift, I'm going through a change, I am not stupid or an idiot, which I hear all the time. But there's an old part of me that is uneducated or unaware, or less aware. And so you can see it in people who have subconsciously identified a separation between their higher self and a lower part of themselves. And that's the other aspect to separation in general, is what's happening is you're starting to connect more with your higher self, or your true essence, or your true being. And because of that, it can feel like you're having an out-of-body experience, or you can even be having an out-of-body experience, having some sort of separation between your physical world as you knew it and an altered state of awareness and dimensional existence. So one other thing that he mentions in the book is hallucinogens. People have had extremely insightful experiences with separation with hallucinogens, because it's a direct connection to a deeper part of your psyche that you don't consciously use on a daily basis. And so I remember my first time taking acid, which is interesting because in this book, this woman kind of says the same things where, what does she say? So this is an excerpt from the book. I knew I was on my way when a releasing and delicious sense of floating in the atmosphere took over and engulfed my entire being. My sense of being contained in my body dissolved. I laughed with delight and said out loud, now I remember what it's like to be without a body. I was in contact with some level of being, fully conscious but without embodiment. An awareness took form in my mind that I had resisted being born into the world in my present incarnation. I understood why. Air is my true element, the matrix of my being. The ecstasy of being free of my body, the aging process, backaches, headaches, creaky joints lasted an eternity. I was no longer confined by the space-time dimensions of Earth. How amazing to be me, fully aware and conscious, and yet without any physical vehicle. That's on page 205. I remember the first time I took acid and calling my friend and be like, my insides are my outsides. And though very arbitrary and elementary, it was an experience, because I didn't have the words or the vocabulary to express exactly, the deeper meaning of what I was experiencing. But now knowing that experience was a really strong influence in knowing that I am not just my body, and I am not just who I am inside of the skull cap that I have, that there is an existence within me that is higher minded, that's working on an alternate level, that's there all the time, but is not easily accessible because we're so focused on acquiring, maintaining, gaining, being successful, everything that has to do with the third dimensional realm, which is totally fine. And that's just how it is for a lot of people. And that is fine for them. I mean, imagine if 100% of the population all of a sudden woke up and was like, oh my gosh, I am not me. I am something else that is me. I mean, we would be in total disarray and chaos because we have like a bunch of like 5-year-old drooling babies in adult bodies. But anyway, so near-death experiences, he says fervent prayer, breathing exercises, ritual initiations, hypnagogic states, and meditation are all ways to experience this separation of self and the higher self. And he doesn't say it outright in the book, but I'm pretty sure what he's talking about is the higher self, is the higher being. And let's see what else. So yes, all the out-of-body experience that you can have outside of the physical third dimensional realm. So I guess my question for you two now is, can you remember a time, one of the first times where you had an altered consciousness experience that allowed you to realize that you were more than just this physical being? That's a big question to pop on you, but
I have. I feel like I'm at a state now where that is actually easily accessible to me, because it happened at such a young age for me, and now I feel like I'm in this space of kind of coexisting with that reality and not having quite as much of a negative feeling or fear-based feeling as I did when I was younger and it first started happening. And it's exciting to feel that way, because I think that for a long time I saw that separateness as like a depressing thing or whatever. Like you get that, I don't know if that happened to you after your acid trip, where you're like, this is so amazing, I feel like this, and then there's like this depression that sets in where you're like, but I am still in this body and I am here, and I do have pain, and I, have like all these human things that I have to deal with. Why, when it feels so good to be out of the body? And I feel like in whatever chapter I'm in now, it's about that unification of the body and that spiritual state. Like there's a reason why we're supposed to experience that for whatever reason. But when I go to sleep, I have a lot of I lucid dream pretty regularly, and I have a lot of dreams where I'm not in a body, like I am my essence, and it's cool. Like I feel like it's very easy for me to live in that state in my meditations or in my dreams. And I think it's because I have experienced like weird out of body experiences, not intentionally. But yeah, the first time, I've told you both about this already, but we haven't recorded it, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but it was through a dream. Like I had a dream where I died in the dream and became one with everything. And I've had numerous dreams and experiences since then that now I don't feel like I have to necessarily die in the dream to be in my essence, which is nice. I feel like I'm just getting to be the essence when I'm in the dream. But I remember feeling that way, like feeling very, like you described, like my insides or my outsides, or like I'm melting, or I'm one with the universe, and it was exciting. And then when you were telling me about that, I had a friend recently who had a DMT experience, and she was like, nobody's gonna understand like what happened to me. And I was like, I know what happened to you. And we had like a whole conversation, and it was cool because for the first time for me, I feel like I had somebody to talk to about when you merge with what feels like everything, and I think that can be beneficial. It's interesting though, because one of the other books I'm reading right now does talk about having those experiences with it being in a drug-induced state versus not a drug-induced state, and the dangers of the imagination once the drugs have worn off, and the reason why reaching those states through the correct avenue of not initiation in the like, not the way that I'm using it, but like, it's like there's chambers of your spiritual growth. And when you do it with that kind of guided, structure that's from within, you're more grounded when that experience is over versus like, that depression that can happen after, or that like, when you were saying like, we'd all be freaking out and drooling like babies, that experience is a lot more when it's induced from a drug state than if you're in a container with like a master or a helper, then there's not as much room for you to feel like you don't know what to do when you come back, because you have somebody that's already gone there to like, help you or whatever. That's why I always feel like it's weird when people just are comfortable doing that stuff without like a shaman or something like that stuff. But I'm so connected to that world that it freaks me out, or I'm like, you're just going to be like out in the abyss. Like, why do you want to be out in the abyss? Like it freaks me out. Like, why do you want to be out in the void without a bottom?
When I was younger, that's all I ever craved. ever. It was like a constant, I wanted to have that experience. I would dream about it. I would dream about taking drugs and then having the experience in my dreams, like through when I was younger, and just crave having that, but in the conscious state rather than the subconscious state. And yeah, that's how it was for me, for sure. Like all these like teenagers doing it now. I don't know. There's a lot of information on the internet now, so I'm sure that there's some good guidance. But you know, when I was younger, there definitely wasn't, and it definitely was not a good idea to go like running around downtown Chicago on the lakefront and be the only one tripping on acid with like cops everywhere. And it's just, yeah, definitely would have just like done it in a more spiritual way, but my ego.
Same, like when you're young, it's just like all about the egoic experience. And I think that there's like, if you're, I don't know, like I feel like what I'm about to say could be perceived in the wrong way, but I feel like you'll get what I'm saying. But like if your soul is at a state that is more elevated than maybe this incarnation's ego, eventually I feel like you can be led to the right path, even if you spent time doing it in a, you know, because that's what I feel like happened with me. It was like I wanted so badly to do all the egoic stuff and just not get on the spiritual path, but there was that like other voice that knew better that pulled me away and just lined things up in a way where I just had to follow it. And I feel like whatever that voice is, whatever that higher self is that was screaming so rampantly when I was so young, feels like there was like some kind of wisdom in my consciousness from somewhere else or some kind of previous life. And I think that's true for all of us, like here right now, you know, it's like you kind of get that stuff out really fast when you're young, and then it's like, okay, like I did it. It was cool. Like, you know, like watching myself age on acid was pretty awesome. Like maybe that was healthy or something. And like, I feel better about aging now because I've seen it. You know what I mean? That kind of stuff. But yeah, totally. Yeah. So yeah, I would say like my first conscious experience was 17 years old. But when I remember there's some memories I have when I was really little before I could talk, where it was the opposite effect. It wasn't so much about me having the separation. It was me having the realization that I was in a body. I don't know if you have any memories like that, but I remember being a baby and it was before I could talk. And I remember like tripping out on being alive in my body, like looking at stuff and just being like, what the fuck is this? Like, it's weird. Like I have that reversal of it too. So I feel like there was some kind of like inner knowing when I was born that I was like an ethereal being in a body all of a sudden. It's super weird.
Nope, can't say I had those feelings. No, but I remember when I was very young having a sense that this couldn't be all there is.
Mm.
That like what's happening now can't be it. It's like, this can't be it. No, this isn't. You're just
totally.
This is it? Really?
We must all be doing that because of our need to like search beyond. You know what I mean? Like we're always like, but why is this happening? Like why are we here?
Yeah, like no, I'm not just gonna be watching Saved by the Bell every day and like going to school and like.
I've been thinking about the Truman Show a lot, like as I've been in this process with you guys with this book, you know, just kind of like that, like where's the man with the switch or whatever, you know, where's Oz? Like when does this get turned on or off or whatever?
Never or always.
Kathleen, but I was going to ask her what she had to say about her separation process. Yeah, that's so good.
Okay, so the homework or the exercise for the separation process was to gaze into your water and say do your dissolving of the self chant. Did you do that?
I haven't done it.
No. There's two meditations that were suggested in the book. One is to chant your name in a dark room until it means nothing anymore, which for me is kind of a big not a big, but it's just something recently that's been an issue for me. Just hearing my name being said out loud is something that I complain about with my husband. It's like, you don't say my name. I want to hear my name, but my mom says my name too much.
Wow.
So it's an interesting thing that I've been experiencing. And so saying my own name over and over again was fun. It was, I was kind of giggling most of the time.
I feel like that's what I'm gonna do, and I feel like I haven't done it yet because I've been waiting till I'm in a space to like be more serious about it.
Yeah, you say it multiple different ways, or I tried to say it similarly the whole time, but then other ways would come out, like Evelyn, Evelyn,
Oh.
Evelyn, Evelyn, Evelyn. And then like it started to sound like I was like calling out to myself after a while.
Whoa.
And that freaked me out.
That's trippy though. It is. That would trip me out.
Mm-hmm.
I hated my name growing up. I freaking hated it. I like despised it, didn't identify with it at all.
I didn't like my name either.
So weird.
I wanted to be named Roxy.
That was one of my favorite names, and we named the dog Roxy. Yeah.
What?
My mom's dog's name is Roxy because I wanted my sister to be named Roxy because I loved that name. And she was like, no, I'm not naming her Roxy. And we named the dog Roxy.
Oh my God, that's the name I wanted to change my name to when I was a little kid. I was like, Mom, can I please change my name to Roxy?
Yeah, it's such a good name.
It really is. Kathleen, do you have any memories of like first experiences of separation from your physical self?
Well, I've never done hallucinogenic drugs, so not in that sense. But I've done a lot of, I would just say, and I guess a little bit similarly to Analisa, like I do that kind of meditation pretty regularly, so I kind of have those experiences a lot without any like taking any drugs or just like not having like crazy peak experiences, but just like more subtle meditations that I've done many times, but nothing like mind-blowing. I think from a young age, I kind of in a similar way was always like, to how you're saying, like, there's got to be more than this out there. And I remember having a really hard time sleeping at night when I was younger because I was so afraid, but also excited at the same time of like what happens after like I leave this physical body. And I remember my dad telling me like, well, people are afraid of life, they're afraid of death. And that's just like a dad's talk, but it was just like that stuck with me for a long time. And that actual part of separation was like one of my earliest fears, I think. And I haven't had any like peak experiences, no, but when I've done the meditation, the like saying my name over and over again, I said it on the full moon in Sagittarius. It was like part of my full moon ritual, and I added my I set it in the water where I put the ashes in. And I was home alone, and I kind of was like, I did it for like about 10 seconds, and I started laughing too. And I'm like, if my boyfriend walked in right now, like, what the fuck would he think? But then I kept doing it. And for me, it took a really long time for me to actually have it sound. Eventually, it took about probably like 2 or 3 minutes for me it feels like a long time, until my name sounded so distant. It almost sounded like, it literally sounded like I was in, I guess it actually sounded like that it was an actual out of body experience where I saw myself in like a fucking yoga class chanting my name as a mantra. Like, it sounded so distant, it sounded like a mantra that I had no egoic attachment to at that point. And like you two, we don't have like common names like Mary, and like, at least Kathleen is a name that no one I knew growing up had. So whenever I heard that name, I'd be like, oh, well, that's me. So it has like a very specific vibration to it, like what you said in the last thing. So it took a long time for me to like release that vibration to it. And here's my cat hugging me. But yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, it took me a long time too, because I was going through, I felt it felt like a comforting connection doing it, and it felt like I was enjoying it for the first minute or so, like on an egoic level, like, ooh, my name,
Yeah.
like, ew.
What's funny is that for me, after I got over like laughing about it, and okay, all right, what are you doing? Sorry. After I got over like laughing about it, and then I just started going, okay, just do it. And I stuck with it. And what's interesting is that for me, it was very much of all of my like embarrassing moments came back when I said my name. Because like when I was younger, I've been like bullied a lot, and just like hearing my name out loud reminded me of all the childhood hurts and wounds around like my identity with that, like with my name, like, oh, Kathleen, whatever. So that's what I heard at first. And it took me a long time to release that until eventually it turned into like that yogi mantra.
I relate to that a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I hated my name for the same reasons. And then when I first started working in retail, I was working at like a vintage store that I was really excited to work at. I always went by Anna growing up, and I didn't like Analisa. And when I started working, people just called me Analisa because that was my name at work. And all of a sudden, the Anna that I associated with getting bullied got to like transcend into adult Analisa, because people were associating me. Like, the people that saw me as a 17-year-old were not the same kids I grew up with, right? That like bullied me. So it was like Analisa became like the new me. And then it was like, now when I hear Anna, I get a little like people that know me well call me Anna, but it still kind of hurts a little bit. And when I hear Analisa, I associate that with the part of myself that I see myself having grown into, that I respect more. So yeah, it's weird, like having that thought process. I feel like that's kind of why I haven't done the meditation yet, because I do feel like I'm going through something right now with myself in that way, and I'm already experiencing those feelings without having even said my name yet. And I'm like, wait, I feel like I'm going to start crying like when I do it. And I'm just waiting for the night that I'm ready to go there.
I I get that for sure. I wasn't expecting that, but I guess it was also like pretty. It felt very cleansing though, to do that. And interestingly enough, I did that the day before I got a very honest review about my asteroid goddess class that I had just finished. And I feel like if I didn't do that ritual, that separation meditation before that, like receiving that email, I would have taken it so much more personally. Actually, I feel like that helped me release a lot of ego. And the next day when I received that email, the sun was conjunct my natal Chiron and mine's in Gemini in my 11th house. So it was very much about like my writing style kind of. And I was like, oh God, that was like super personal and like really cut me deep. But I feel like, yeah, if I didn't do that separation ritual, then I would have like sat there and cried, and I didn't. I was just like, okay, that sucks, but all right.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I mean, it was great for that. It was definitely great for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that stuff when it happens. Like, it's just amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Can't make it up.
Yeah, that's incredible. When I started saying my name over and over again, it started to sound like my mom yelling at me. And then I was like, all right, I'm going to stop this now because I'm not ready to go there. Like, universe, I told you I'm not doing that this time around. That's like creeping in. But yeah, I was like, oh God, that's what it sounds like when my mom says my name.
It's so crazy because it's like, you think about that, because like in numerology, your name has a vibration, to it. And you think about like I think about that a lot. Like whatever you name somebody, like you're sealing a part of their vibrational fate. But then it's like, is that person also being called though on a vibration to apply that vibration to another individual? Like my dog, for example, we had his name picked out like years before he was born. And when he came in, it was like, that is totally him, like like his name fits him, there's stuff like that. It was like, did we manifest him, or was it, in the cards or whatever? It's just crazy to think about. But it is interesting that like whatever experiences you have, this is interesting. I'm getting off topic a little bit, but it is interesting to think about from a psychological perspective of how we influence our world around us. In dog training, the words that you use dogs learn through association. They don't have a rational mind. So they, like if you hit them with a glass bottle, they're going to associate every glass bottle they see with being hit. If they associate the glass bottle with a word that they like and they get water out of it, they're going to come running to the glass bottle. So they say when you're training a dog, you never want to say their name in a bad way, because if you say it in a bad way, then the command that you're trying to do, essentially, like if you want a dog to come and you're screaming in a negative way, their name, come, they're going to run the other way unless they get hit afterwards. Then they might come because they're associating running away with getting hit afterwards. But they don't have a rational mind. They're not like, oh, my mom is yelling my name because she's mad at me right now because I'm not coming. They just hear these loud negative words and then they have to guess what language we're speaking, and they just hope that they do the right thing. So they'll say that you want to do all that treat rewarding to kind of, you're just nurturing the stuff that you want, and then you always want their name to be something that is positive for them, that you like baby talk, and you want them to feel love when they hear their name. And it's just interesting because it's like that's not really in our consciousness actively right now. Like we don't think about that. Like people just have names and we're just like, whatever, everything just has a name and it's whatever. But it's just when you start thinking about like the word and the items or the things attached to it in more of that way, it's pretty profound, like the effect it can have.
Another rando thing about that though, and the name and dog training, is that I've read that dogs only associate their name with the first sound of the word. And the first sound that their name makes is how they identify themselves. Which is interesting because in numerology and looking at your name sound, the first sound that your name makes is like the first expression of you, of your creative expression out. And so the first two letters are actually some of the most important letters in the whole name.
Wow.
Yeah, which is not associated, but it happens to parallel in a weird way.
Yeah.
That makes sense. My cat who was just on me was he definitely named himself, or made it clear that he responds to Mimi as opposed to, like, I mean, it's technically Zemo is his name, and his shelter name was Magneto.
Oh.
So yeah, he's named after two villains in comic book villains, but so he responds to, and he like recognizes Mimi or meme, so it's just Mimi.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because they say if you want to rename a dog that you've adopted, you need to make the first sound different than what their old name was, so that they can create new associations. So it's really interesting that the cat already had like, no, I'm energized by so that shall be my name.
Me.
Me.
That's
So another exercise for the separation chapter was to, while in public, acknowledge people, but also acknowledge your reaction, your subconscious reactions to them specifically, and the thoughts that come up randomly about them. Maybe at the grocery store, or just at the store, or just somewhere where you have no actual connection to these people and they are truly strangers that you may or may not ever see again, and you may or may not have any connection with them ever. The reason being is that it allows you to acknowledge these snap associations and judgments that you have towards external beings from yourself, to find a deeper awareness of where your judgments and snap criticisms lie within about your own self. And so were you guys able to do that, and what was your experience like? Analisa, you go first.
Okay. Yeah, this is like been kind of weird with that, because essentially I've been giving away money a lot more. Like, there's something that happened through that of like, I'm paying attention to people in a way that I used to just have a lot more barriers or walls up. Like I wouldn't notice. Like I'd be like, oh, there's a woman in the background that's panhandling, and I just keep walking. Like it was like it would be there, but I wouldn't like look or pay attention, you know? Or I wasn't really like, I just have these like defense mechanisms for confrontation, you know, with strangers or interactions. And then once I was becoming a little more aware of it, I realized that it wasn't really in line with my value system on like how I view myself. Like I view myself being a compassionate person and holding space for everybody, and, you know, just having a certain way that I see myself engaging. And I realized like, no, I'm still really selective on like who I do that with. And so I've been trying to be a little bit more just embodying what I value or think is like neutral, I guess, if that makes sense, without obviously like I have a strong intuition. I'm not going to be naive and stupid, but like one of the things that happened recently was I was at a concert, and I was waiting for my friends outside, and this guy in a wheelchair came up asking for money, and I just had money and I gave it to him. Like I didn't even think about it. I was just like, here's some money. And we started talking, and he was like, he was not doing well. Like, he was an older guy in a wheelchair. It's obviously homeless and like missing all his teeth, but he was talking about how he had seen the band like 30 years ago and all this stuff. And he said that I was beautiful. And I was like, well, you're beautiful. And it was just like, I was just saying things without really even thinking about it. Like, I was just responding the way I would respond to a friend. And then he got kind of weird a little bit. And I was like, you should go get some food with that money. And then my friends came out and I just like walked away, you know? But in the past, like when I was younger, like 10 years ago, that's not the person that I was in those situations. I was just, it's not that I didn't have empathy or compassion. It was just like, I would just get annoyed and I didn't have any money. Like, I was a kid, you know? And I was just like, dude, I don't have anything. Like, Portland, Oregon, people are very aggressive there in that way. And so I just would get angry at it. And here, like, it's just different. But I've just had a lot of interactions like that since we started this. And previous to this, I was kind of already putting myself in that space. But it's becoming more with that type of exercise, not like a dilemma anymore. It's just like, this is the right thing to do and I have the means to do it, so I'm just going to. And I'm not, my walls aren't up the way that they were. Like, I feel very soft and still myself and still confident and still like able to have boundaries, but I'm not operating from this like aggro, stay away from me, you know, kind of, what do you want, you know, kind of place. So it's like how I used to be all the time. And my husband's still kind of caught up in some of that stuff. And so it's been interesting to watch it dissolve in me more in a way that just being more self-aware of. So yeah, I've been like also like solicitors at the door, I'm usually really mean to, and I've been less mean. I've been a lot nicer. Like, just stuff like that, you know, less Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
What about you guys?
What about you, Kathleen? You go.
I totally forgot to do that specific thing, and I wrote it down too, but a lot has happened since I watched the video to catch up. But what's interesting is that I feel like this specific piece of separation with like discerning how you're reacting, it actually goes along a lot with what my original calcination, this whole thing, my intention for this whole alchemy summer really happened with the full moon in Scorpio. When I think I remember, like, one of the last times I was on, I was telling you guys about my sister thingy, with her feeling like super judgmental of what I'm doing now. And so I had that talk with her for my calcination ritual, and it is actually really fitting that I like had a huge space in between that timing and now with separation, because I actually feel like I went through separation before with that specific process, and not with like maybe this, you know, ritual with like everything else in my external world, but with this specific thing with my sister, I feel like I went through a separation like over the course of 2 weeks, or in the portal space between the Scorpio full moon and the Sagittarius full moon, where I naturally kind of was led to simmering down from having a not confrontation, but having a whatever conversation with her, not really going anywhere with it, but just at least we said some things and brought some things to the surface. And then, that day when I came home, I was like super fucking angry about how it actually went, and like really let myself process everything. And it took me a while and then I was like, that's what I need to release, because it's just like, it made me way more angry. And then in the space of about a month to 2 weeks to 4 weeks, I realized slowly that I was that all that anger was bringing up different, it was very much a separation thing where I was like every day gradually seeing how all the things that I was super angry about in that conversation with my sister had a lot to do with, oh, well, this is actually a subconscious thing that you are having towards yourself. There's certain shame that you're holding, that you're putting it on your sister. There's certain guilt that you're holding on to, that you're putting it on your sister, and you're blaming her, and you're not any better or any less judgmental by you not recognizing that within yourself. So that was like how that kind of naturally just occurred a little bit. And yeah, so with the Gemini, I think the Gemini full moon was in between. Yeah, it was in between those two. The Gemini new moon was in between those two. So that's when I did a couple things like breath work and stuff like that to kind of help me. I did breath work for that to help like separate what was going on there. And then I forget what else I did. I did something, but with part of this thing, and it actually might have been when I wrote down my calcination stuff, because I kind of let that happen. But that was my separation thing that I think just naturally occurred, but I didn't specifically go to the grocery store and do this meditation or anything like that. So yeah,
definitely. It'll be, it's, everyone is different and unique and has their own spiritual path and journey. And so if one process comes up differently for you, that is exactly how it should, and that is exactly how it did. So I think what's most important of it all, though, is identifying the processes that you're going through and being able to link up the processes along with your personal experiences. And that's really it. And these meditations and these exercises just help to put it into perspective on a very mundane level. And so if it's not happening naturally, then that's one way that you can induce it, so to speak. So yeah, the breath work is really big for separation because of the air element. And the separation aspect is, these are all really deeply emotional and can be traumatizing and traumatic experiences. The calcination in itself it's burning in the flames of your ego, and then burning the ego down, and then the disillusion, which is a part of the separation. I feel like they're pretty similar. Disillusion, maybe disillusion is a little more subtle because it is becoming aware of the subtleties of how you've been in a fantasy or illusion state, an illusory world. And then separation is the process of then moving away from that illusory world to a more true form of existing that you truly desire within yourself, or a higher desire. And so with Dennis William Hauck's experience with separation, he links it up to the point when he basically let go of everything, his great career, his foundation, everything that he had been building up for himself. He's a very intelligent person, obviously, and decides to go work in a mine, a gold mine, as a laborer in the desert, in the middle of nowhere, low-paying job, a miner, working in the earth, going down deep to excavate gold. And that for him is ironically a time of separation for him. And he says that during this time too, he was able to heal from being away from all of the things that were triggering his ego. So a lot of common experiences that you'll see with people is letting go of any sort of egoic connection to fame, glory, material success. And that in itself can be very painful for a lot of people. If they whether they step away from it purposefully or willfully, or if the universe around them decides that it's time for them to separate from it inevitably, due to whatever destined predetermined agreement that they've had with this experience. Like, okay, now I'm going to go down there, I'm going to like amass a bunch of wealth, I'm going to enjoy it for a long time, and then I'm probably going to enjoy it so much that I'll need an external force to take it all away from me. So it's like to me, a predestined agreement before coming into this incarnation that, yes, in fact, I will experience this, because I know that in this carnation, my will require external outside forces to help with that evolution. More about the breath work with this connection to air. I'll just read a little excerpt on that. In Transporting the Breath, says a 2,500-year-old inscription from the Chow dynasty, the inhalation must be full and the breath should be held and gathered. If it is gathered, it becomes magic. If it becomes magic, it descends and quiets down. If it quiets down, it so solidifies. If it is solidified, then it germinates. If it germinates, it grows. If it grows, it retreats upward. If it retreats upward, it reaches the top of the head. If it reaches the top of the head, it still presses up. For the secret power of heaven moves above, and the secret power of earth moves below. He who follows this will live. He who acts contrary to this will die. And how fascinating is it that air is an element? It is a thing that we, of course, forget exists constantly, but without it, we die. And if we don't breathe it properly into our bodies, we die slowly in different ways. And growing up as a Christian, I remember air always being a common parallel for spirit, and how that one should believe in God because it's just like air. You can't see it, but it's there and it exists. But going even deeper, the air is how we connect our outside experience with our inner experience, with our external world and our inner world, by breathing it in, literally. Currently, our air quality has been very poor out here in the desert. I don't know about where you guys are, but so that's something I've been very conscious of, that the air that we're breathing is actually making us sick. And that's another environmental problem that's coming up with the astrological, and of course, just in general, evolution of the earth and Gaia's process of alchemical transformation, is that the air that we're breathing now it can make people sick. I have a friend who she's pregnant and had some really like flu-like symptoms, went to the doctor, they couldn't figure it out. They were like, we have to run all these tests, your baby's gonna die if we don't. Got really hyped up and super paranoid about it, couldn't find anything, ran all these CT scans and everything, blood work, nothing. And then she goes on to like the weather app and finds that the air quality is poor. And that was it. That's all it was. But we don't even realize it. We don't even see it. We don't even think about it. But when you're doing breath work and you're having a connection to that external source of life, then you become more aware, and it becomes a very important part of our existence. And it must be more so than it currently is. Let's see. What does he say about the separate person? So after we've gone through this process of separating ourselves, there is a, oh, well, if you haven't gone through it and you need to, other than self-deprecating thoughts, being overtly assertive and controlling, refusing to compromise in even mundane matters, can be frustrated and become cruel. So these are symptoms of a non-separate person who should be separate, because it's like a holding on. And it's very scorpionic too, which is how he describes it, where when the scorpion doesn't let go, then it's like a holding on for dear life, and it becomes rigid. As it is a fixed sign, it becomes rigid, emotionally cold, and brooding and cruel towards external people and forces, because it's that fixity within the scorpion where it's like, I'm not gonna, it's like clenching down, like, no, I'm not moving, this is me, I'm never gonna change. This is how it's been for decades, it's how it's always gonna be. But when someone goes through this process and they are separate and they have the ability to disconnect from their egoic desires, they can, let's see. On the other hand, people undergoing separation tend to be courageous and daring, often initiating major changes in the world and the lives of the people around them, as did Alexander the Great. Successful separation is a quality many people admire in actors like John Wayne, Katharine Hepburn, and Jodie Foster. If their unyielding willpower can be harnessed, such people can progress rapidly through alchemical transformation and work miracles never before seen in the world. The Egyptians related Scorpio to the descent into the underworld to bring back knowledge, and their Scorpio goddess was Selket, who led the deceased to the other side. The lifelong search of scorpions is for spiritual transformation, and their qualities are intense introspection and self-control. But scorpions are bold and can be persistent and opinionated to a fault, often trampling the feelings of others and pursuing their goals. Hillary Rodham Clinton. Hillary Rodham Clinton is a Scorpio. She's a Scorpio in the 12th house, by the way. So probably into some mystery schools there, that one. Theodore Roosevelt, George Patton, Senator Joseph McCarthy, Charles Manson, Dylan Thomas, Richard Burton, Ed Asner, Roseanne were all born under the sign of the Scorpion. Just as societies and cultures can emphasize different aspects of soul or spirit, we all know people who seem to have more spirit than soul, or vice versa. But it is a rare person indeed who has succeeded in uniting both soul and spirit in one holistic approach to life. That harmonious marriage of soul and spirit takes place during an alchemical operation known as conjunction, which is the next chapter, chapter 14. And so conjunction is creating the overall vessel now for this murky water to reside in. So we're creating the vessel of self, the image of yourself that you desire most to see in the world. The higher self, not the person that is in the physical form. One thing that I think is really great as an exercise for chapter 14, if you are ambitious or if you have these materials available to you already, creating a vessel out of earth in some way, clay, if you're able to hold the water. Out of the vision that you see, your truest, highest vision of yourself. But the exercise for everyone else who maybe does not have access to clay or building materials, who are just not as Taurian, crafty, or Virgoan as others, drawing a picture, watercolor, painting, whatever, however big you want it, it doesn't matter, pen, Sharpie, gel pen, I don't care, anything. Drawing a picture with whatever materials resonate with you, however detailed you want it to be, however ambiguous and vague you want it to be, using colors that you identify with, creating an image of you. The other exercise, if you are able to, is going out into nature. And this is about working with the earth. And this actually goes back to the very beginning four corners meditation that we were doing before. So we're bringing that, incorporating that back now. We're reorienting ourselves on earth now that we've let go of a lot. This is the part where you're like, where am I? Who am I? What direction am I going in? I don't know. So working with the earth to help reorient yourself by going into nature, go into the forest, go wherever you can in a place where you feel safe and where you're able to go be vulnerable with yourself. Create a circle around you, which is a protective sphere, but also you are recreating the symbol for the sun. So you are essentially creating the occult symbol within your own self, as your own self, the sun. So you are creating your own solar system, essentially. And then there's a meditation in the book in chapter 14. It's page 225. So he has it all written down in page 225. So you can go ahead and read that. It's all written out, but what you'll do is you're going to do a four corners meditation where you're calling in the four corners of yourself. Reorienting your soul self to yourself rather than to any other egoic connection that you have, whatever pull that your external self is telling you to go in terms of finding or reaching success or any. No, we're getting rid of the compass that the ego had created or had been working off of before and creating a new compass. Starting new. So conjunction is the marriage of the sun and the moon, the marriage of the self within yourself, the marriage of the masculine and your feminine, which is actively working to create something. So that's why creating a painting in the image of yourself is the exercise for conjunction. And when you read the chapter, it'll make more sense. So read the chapter first. And then do these two exercises. So then again, if you're able to find clay or have access to that, that's a really fantastic exercise to do in conjunction with this. But if you don't, that's fine. Okay, well, I think that's all I've got. Do you guys have anything to add or questions about anything? Comments, concerns?
No, sounds really exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Cool. So the next meetup is on July 11th. So that on July 11th, so there's 2 weeks to read chapter 14, and it's a little bit longer than chapter 13 because it's a kind of a bigger process of conjoining your polarity, conjoining the two selves. And he explains all of that in chapter 14. So yeah, that's that.
Cool.
Yeah. So I'll see you guys on July 11th, same place, same time. And this recording will get uploaded. And I don't know, I can probably do it either tonight or tomorrow. So if you need a refresher, it'll be on the Astrom Council YouTube page. And other than that, thank you guys so much for being a part of this journey. It, of course, would not be anything without all of your guys' accomplishments. And I can't think right now. I'm kind of losing train of thought, but without you guys it would be nothing. And so the group work is so fundamental in sharing our ideas and how we experience these different exercises and meditations. It's really fascinating to see the work in other people too, And so also, if you have any comments about it, leave it in the comments section on the YouTube page. That's where you guys can share and connect. It's a lot easier than the other methods, but yeah. So you guys have a fantastic next 2 weeks and a full moon, or a new moon.
Eclipse.
Panther, eclipse. And
Retrograde. Mercury will be retrograde by our next meeting.
Yeah.
Yay. I'm getting the car fixed. We got the car fixed today, so hopefully
Get all that done.
get on top of that. Don't buy a car during Mercury retrograde.
So many retrogrades too. Like it's like Mercury retrograde, but then we're just in retrograde hell. Anyways.
Again, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
Right? We're used to it. We've got the tools.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Have a
All
good
right.
night.
Well,
Bye. Good night.
Bye, Kathleen.
Bye.